What's up, folks? I had an insomnia bout, which means I've finally been able to get up to speed, or I'm starting to get up to speed on Picard Season 2, which is why this episode is called Catching Up with Picard, because I've only seen the first 3 episodes now. I didn't get to watch this when it came out because Cris and I were in the middle of moving, and so it wasn't a priority. And then when I realized that Season 3 was about to drop, and it's the final season, I was like, oh crap, I need to actually hurry up and watch Season 2 so that I can be up to speed with everything and be ready to go. So that's what I've been doing in these little insomnia bouts, which is why I'm up at well, I'm recording this at 4:15 in the morning after having been up since about 1:30. It's all good. I get lots of work done in the evening hours when the cats are asleep. So we're gonna be talking the first few episodes here. I highly doubt that there's anybody watching this that hasn't seen season 2 yet because I'm like literally a year behind the curve. So I probably don't need to say this, but I'm going to anyway. Spoiler alert, because I will be talking everything I've come across so far, and going from there. So this has been your warning. If you're new here, welcome aboard. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell icon so you can continue to get updates as we go deeper into all the other things that I do on YouTube, and of course reviewing season 3 when it comes out. Because now we're moved and I can actually be on hand when it's airing. So first, let me say that the second episode of this show is probably the darkest and best episode of Star Trek I have ever seen. Now, before we go any further, here's one thing you should know about me. If you've never listened to any of my videos before, if you've never watched my reviews on Star Wars and other stuff, um, I have this opinion that is not popular with everyone, and this is this opinion. When it comes to Star Wars and Star Trek, all Star Trek is good Star Trek. It's just that some Star Trek is better than other Star Trek. Same applies for Star Wars. So I don't have this viewpoint that there are bad things. I'm not one of those people you're going to find who's like, I hate this show because that's not the Star Trek I grew up with. And I can't believe they did that with this character. And it would never, that's not my Obi-Wan. Meh. I don't do that. My inner child is alive and well, and I love to be entertained. So I'm really easy to please, and I've had franchises that I've been following since I was 5 years old that I will continue to enjoy until I'm in the grave. Um, Star Wars, Star Trek, those are some of the franchises that I will always love. That being said, I've seen every bit of Star Trek that's out there. Ups and downs, ladies and gentlemen. There are ups and downs. But season 2, I think for me, as where I sit in my life right now, this second episode here of season 2. Did I say season 3? I don't know. It's early. I haven't slept. Um, episode 2, season 2. Best thing I've seen. Best piece of Star Trek. Darkest piece of Star Trek. So essentially, we have Picard going through the motions in episode 1 until we get to the end, which is like the kicker. Q's back. And if Q's back, you know that there's going to be stuff happening. Now, normally I'm not a fan of the time travel trope. It's been done to death in Star Trek, and I'll readily admit that it is one of the weakest points of the franchise is how often they rely upon time travel to create story arcs. That being said, when Q drops Picard off and Picard realizes that he's in this new world where the Federation has become the Confederation, and they are a how to say that, xenogistic. I don't know how to say that. It's a horribly racist government that says humans first, all aliens should be, subjugated and will kill their leaders and everything else. And Picard is like the grand general who has spent his entire career subjugating planets and wiping out, millions of civilians and everything in the name of the Confederation. And then Seven of Nine is like the president, and Raffi's here as like a police officer. Um, Agnes is like a scientist for the Confederation. Rios is a ship captain, and they all get transported here with their memories intact. And this first episode, or that second episode, which I kind of consider to be the first, because the first episode was just kind of like, Q shows up, that's when the season starts for me. So we get this horribly bleak picture of what the Federation could have become had it followed the path of fear and racism and inclusivity, um, of only letting these people be included, and exclusivity to all the non-humans, which is very much, just throwing this out there, it is what the Empire was all about, in Star Wars. Humans first, and alien races are treated with suspicion or outright hated. Um, it's a common theme when you see it in a science fiction scenario, but the way they showed it was just, I was just left thinking, oh my god, this is really dark. And I think that's one of the reasons. I think I talked about this somewhere when Picard was airing. I had said that I appreciated it because it was one of the first times I had had an adult version of Star Trek where we have blood and violence and cursing, adult language. It's not hand holding or tiptoeing around things. And Star Trek has always done I would say, a reasonable job over the years for having episodes, especially when you get into Deep Space Nine and all the writing that was on Deep Space Nine. They're not afraid to tackle social issues and political issues in the show in a way, and they do that in episode 3 here, um, because when they're on, they have to go. I'm jumping ahead here, catching up with things. Um, they have to go back in time to fix this timeline breach that Q did, right? And that's why they're on this alternate timeline where it's the Confederation versus the Federation. But they figure out how to get back in time, and they're there in Los Angeles in 2024, and they're looking at the future of what the Confederation becomes, because they're still on that timeline. They've just gone back in time in that timeline to fix the thing that'll send them back to their timeline, right? I know it's time travel shit. The They look out and they see all the wildfires above Los Angeles and all the smoke rising and everything else. And Jerry Ryan's character Seven is like, this is the beginning of the end for them, isn't it? And her and Raffi are having this conversation about, you know, choking the planet, and so they're making their social commentary here on global warming and people need to do more, blah blah blah. Um, Not blah 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 as me being sarcastic. I'm just saying I'm not gonna. I don't want anybody to take the wrong impression of that. I'm just saying that's my way of. They talk about that for quite a bit. For me, the far more important conversation was the one being had about fascism and blind obedience and blind faith in leadership who want to promote a certain. It's really interesting when Picard first realizes where he's at, because they're in his home essentially, and as they're standing there, he and Q are having a conversation. He looks around and he realizes that all these individuals who are working in the house are like completely paused, and they're not even looking up at him. They're like looking at the floor, and he looks around and it's all pointed ears. And I've always, I'm of the opinion that Vulcans and Romulans, it's just elves in space, right? But it immediately transported me back to so many fantasy worlds that I've watched, read, or played in over the years where, you have like this human society where the elves become enslaved, the elves and the dwarves, and hell, we're doing it with our own fantasy world in the sense that we're at the beginning of the human versus fae relationship. It's a fun trope to play around with. But when you see that and you see all the pointed ears, I was like, oh my God, we're going down the route of slavery and subjugation to mankind. And so there's social commentary there on refugees um, and just the conquering of other nations and taking their resources. And man, there's a lot going on in that second episode of season 2 of Picard, which is why I think it's one of the best episodes I've ever seen. Definitely one of the darkest. But from there, like I said, I'm a little. They've thrown two things into the works that are tropes. One is, of course, we have the time travel, but they also brought the Borg back again. And I realize that that's part of what they're trying to do with the Picard show is weave elements of um, uh, the previous timelines that he's been involved in with the Next Generation and beyond. They're trying to bring in some of the old audience with the new audience and so on and so forth. So I get it, but at the same time, it was like the Borg again. How's this going to play out? I don't know. I suppose I'm on for the ride. These are short seasons, so I'm at the very least I'm engaged enough now after the first 3 episodes to say okay. I am getting a chuckle out of Rios's character because I like the actor. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, and I'm again stream of consciousness. The first thing I saw him in that I can remember was when he did the Musketeers for the BBC. That show, if you haven't ever watched The Musketeers, I think it was 3 seasons. Cris and I watched it. Some of the best costume design I've ever seen, and the dueling and the muskets, and he was one of the 3 Musketeers, the guy who's playing Chris Rios, Cristobal. Um, his arc when he gets on planet Earth is very funny to me because they specifically are like, don't get in trouble, don't get arrested, all these things. And he loses his badge, he gets arrested. They think he's an illegal alien. So that's how the episode ends, is with him getting hauled off to jail. And it's just like, it made me chuckle because he's doing all the things they said not to do because any engagement with the timeline could have repercussions. I don't know. So there's things in here that made me chuckle, things that made me kind of roll my eyes, time travel. But the way the Confederacy is being portrayed is quite terrifying. And from a storyline and from a storytelling perspective, I think that's the one thing I've enjoyed so far is seeing that aspect in I keep saying season, in episode 2 of season 2. Um, Now in episode 3, they've gotten away from that threat, but it's still sort of hanging over the back of them. And I don't know. I don't know if this is going to be a season arc or just a, first 3 episodes, first 4 episodes, first. I mean, we're through the 3rd episode now, so it's going to take up a few episodes at least. I don't know anything yet. I haven't looked up any spoilers. I haven't read anything else. The only thing I knew going into this was that Q was involved and that sometime by the end we get back in touch with more of the people from the Next Generation again, little cameo things here and there. And then, of course, season 3 is going to feature, I think, all of the casts, most if not all of the cast from the Next Generation. So I don't know. Love to hear your thoughts if you have also watched it. If you have seen it, great. As of this recording, I've only watched the first 3 episodes. So if you have anything you want to add to the conversation about that, drop them down in the comments below. Like, subscribe, hit the bell icon if you would. Support if you can. I realize I'm holding my wife's cup because this is the Feliz Dia de las Madres, Happy Mother's Day cup. It's all good. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning when I got my coffee cup. Anyway, support if you can. Memberships, all that good stuff. And I'll see everybody in the next episode. Until then, stay safe. Happy viewing. Happy reading. Happy everything.